If you've been following the news recently, you may have heard that 95% of Sonoma Valley teachers have voted to strike if the district does not offer a competitive salary package to their teachers. The obvious question is then, can Sonoma Valley Unified pay their teachers a competitive wage? This is simply a math calculation, dictated by the assumptions and projections being made by the district office to drive decisions. Let's get a little background on how school budgeting works. At the end of each fiscal year, June 30th, districts close their books. This is a screenshot of the most pertinent information provided at that time in June 2022. It's obviously overwhelming and tiny, so I'm going to take a higher level look at this information for the sake of our eyes and clarity. This screen shows the district's revenues from their prior year and what they are budgeting for next year. There are various sources of revenue for the district, but the line in gray is the total. You'll notice that the district is projecting an 8.4% decline in revenues for next year. We'll revisit this in a bit. Here are the district's expenses. These categories are all the same for districts across the state. So at a very high level, this slide shows the calculation that really matters at the end of the day. Total revenues minus expenses gives us the green box, the district's net income in accounting terms. That remaining excess or deficiency is added or subtracted from the ending fund balance from the prior year. At the end of last fiscal year, June 2022, that reserve total in yellow was over $14 million, way more than the $2.1 million required by the state for economic uncertainties. So you may notice a concerning number here. The district is projecting a steep deficit for next year. Although at the end of the day, the district reserve is still $11.7 million, which is still more than 5 times the amount required by the state. So what is driving this projected deficit for next year? Let's take a deeper look at this revenue line. The district is projecting an 8.4% decline in revenues. That seems steep. Let's take a look at how the district's revenues have behaved over time. These are the total revenues since 2010. Here are the year-over-year percentage change numbers. There is not a single year of declining revenues, yet the district is projecting a massive decline for next year of 8.43%. Okay, so how accurate has the district been with their projections in the past? Well, not accurate at all. In the past 6 years, the district's projections have been off by over $38 million in total. To be clear, they have significantly under-projected revenues year after year after year, always claiming that the financial sky is falling when it never does. If you haven't already, watch the 4-minute video linked below for a more detailed explanation of the district's Chicken Little budgeting process and how it hurts the district. These revenue projections that are off by millions and millions of dollars year after year are not worth the paper they are printed on. Now let's get back to the question at hand. Can Sonoma Valley Unified pay their teachers a competitive wage that is more in line with teacher salaries across the state? Let's look at some scenarios that use more reasonable revenue projections. This slide covers a number of scenarios for the district finances with more reasonable revenue assumptions. For each scenario, certificated salaries are increased by 11.7%, and to be cautious, benefits have been increased by that same amount. Other expenses have been held constant. Classified salaries have already received a 9.9% increase. Let's look at scenario 1 in more detail. This scenario assumes no growth at all in revenues, so they stay flat at $71.6 million. Now remember, since 2010, as far back as I can gather these numbers on the state's financial website, this district has never seen a decline. So zero growth would actually be a very conservative projection. With teacher salaries being increased by the requested 11.7%, the year-end result would be a surplus of $260K, increasing the district's reserve to $14.6 million. Let's look at scenario 2. Here, revenues are assumed to grow at the historical average rate year over year. The average year-over-year change since 2010 is 6.44%. With teacher raises, the district would increase reserves by $4.9 million to $19.2 million. Let's look at scenario 3. Here, revenues are assumed to grow at the historical median rate instead of the average year over year. The median year over year change since 2010 is 5.29%. With teacher raises, the district would increase reserves by $4.1 million to $18.4 million. Let's look at scenario 4. Some might say, well, wasn't there a ton of extra funding in 2020-21 for COVID? Okay, so let's eliminate that year's revenue growth of 12.94% from the historical average calculation. With that outlier removed, the average revenue growth since 2010 has been 5.79%. With teacher raises, the district would still increase reserves by $4.4 million to $18.7 million. Let's look at scenario 5 and be super conservative. Here are the historical revenue growth rates since 2010. If we eliminate all growth rates over 10% and only use those that are in the single digits for our calculation, the average revenue growth since 2010 has been 3.31%. With teacher raises, the district would still increase reserves by $2.6 million to $17 million. The only scenario in which the district reduces the reserve balance is here. When you use a chicken little sky is falling assumption of negative 8.4% decline in revenues, deficit spending does occur. But even then, the reserves are still $8.5 million, 4 times higher than the level required by state law for economic uncertainties. What do you think is more likely to happen? A business office who has not been right in years is finally right? Or historical funding trends continue? A few things can be guaranteed if Sonoma Valley Unified does not agree to pay their teachers a competitive wage. 1, teachers will strike. 2, there will be even more turnover in our schools. 3, fewer teachers will be willing to work in a district that pays below market rate wages. If you want your voice heard on this matter, please call or email our superintendent or send emails to our Board of Trustees. Thank you.